I came home from my 3-week business trip to Singapore expecting dinner and my husband's embrace. Instead, I found our London flat empty except for a heavily pregnant woman sitting at my kitchen table. The note beside her read, "Gone to Ibiza. With the lads. Jasmine needs looking after until the baby comes. She's carrying my son." Jasmine looked up at me with defiant green eyes and said, "Well then, shall we sort this mess out together?" But I nodded. 5 days later, Eric was on his knees begging me to take him back, but by then it was far too late. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My key trembled in the lock of our Kensington flat as exhaustion weighed down my shoulders. 21 days in Singapore closing. The biggest marketing deal of my career, and all I wanted was to collapse into Eric's arms and share a bottle of the expensive wine we'd been saving. The hallway lights were off, which seemed odd for 7 p.m. on a Thursday evening, but I assumed Eric was perhaps having a shower or watching television in the lounge. "Eric?" I called out, wheeling my suitcase across the hardwood floor. "I'm home." Silence. The familiar scent of our flat had changed. Instead of Eric's cologne and the lavender candles I'd left burning in automatic timers, there was something else, vanilla perfume and something distinctly domestic. Baby powder, perhaps? I flicked on the kitchen lights and nearly dropped my laptop bag. A woman I'd never seen before sat at my antique dining table, her hands wrapped around a mug of what appeared to be my expensive Earl Grey tea. She was heavily pregnant, perhaps 7 or 8 months along, with auburn hair cascading over her shoulders and striking green eyes that assessed me with an almost predatory intelligence. She wore one of Eric's Oxford shirts over leggings, the fabric straining across her substantial bump. "You must be Avery," she said calmly, as if pregnant strangers regularly occupied my kitchen. Her accent was distinctly northern, Manchester, perhaps. "I'm Jasmine Blackwood." My mouth opened and closed soundlessly. This had to be some sort of mistake, perhaps a friend of Eric's sister who needed temporary accommodation. But the way she sat in my chair, using my china, suggested a comfort level that made my stomach clench with unease. "I'm sorry. But where's Eric?" I managed, setting down my bags with deliberate care. "And how did you get into our flat?" Jasmine's lips curved into what might have been a smile, but her eyes remained calculating. She gestured to a cream-colored envelope propped against the fruit bowl in the center of the table. The fruit bowl I'd filled with fresh apples before leaving for Singapore, now containing only a few withered specimens. "He left this for you," she said simply. With hands that had begun to shake, I picked up the envelope. My name was written across it in Eric's familiar scrawl, but the paper felt expensive, heavier than our usual household stationery. Inside, folded with precise creases, was a single sheet of matching paper. "Avery, gone to Ibiza with Dylan and Sebastian for a proper lads' holiday. Jasmine needs looking after until the baby comes. She's 7 months along and carrying my son. The spare room is already set up for her. She'll explain everything. Be back in a fortnight." I read the note 3 times, certain there must be some mistake. The words seemed to rearrange themselves before my eyes, refusing to form coherent, meaning carrying my son. The spare room is already set up. "I don't understand," I whispered, sinking into the chair opposite Jasmine. This has to be some sort of joke. Jasmine reached across the table and gently took the letter from my nerveless fingers. "I'm afraid it's quite real, love. Eric and I have been together for 8 months now. The baby's due in 6 weeks. The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. 8 months. While I'd been traveling for work, building my career, planning our future, Eric had been building a different future entirely. With someone else. 8 months, I repeated numbly. But we were trying for a baby ourselves. We've been trying for over a year. Something flickered across Jasmine's face. Sympathy, perhaps, or recognition of shared pain. Yes, he mentioned that. Said you were having difficulties. The casual way she referenced our most private struggles, our heartbreak, our monthly disappointments, sent a surge of humiliation through me. How many intimate details of our marriage had Eric shared with this stranger? Where is he exactly? I asked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. And when did he leave? Jasmine pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be a group chat. Left Tuesday morning. He, Dylan Richardson, and Sebastian Hayes. Some resort in San Antonio by the looks of their Instagram stories. She turned the screen toward me. There was Eric, shirtless and grinning, a cocktail in his hand and his arm around Dylan. They were clearly on a boat, the Mediterranean sparkling behind them. The timestamp showed this morning, while I'd been in customs at Heathrow, exhausted, and eager to come home to him. Tuesday, I said slowly. But I've been texting him all week. He's been responding. Oh, that was me, Jasmine said matter-of-factly. He gave me his phone to handle things while he was away. Didn't want you worrying unnecessarily. The violation of that revelation left me speechless. Someone else had been reading my messages, responding as my husband, crafting replies designed to keep me unsuspecting while I worked 18-hour days half a world away. I stood abruptly, needing movement, needing space to process what felt like an alternate reality. Walking to the window, I stared down at the familiar London street, searching for something that made sense. Mrs. Chen was walking her corgi. The corner shop's neon sign flickered as always. Everything looked normal, but my entire world had apparently shifted while I was gone. How long have you been staying here? I asked without turning around. Since Monday. Eric wanted me settled in before he left. I turned back to face her. And the spare room? Converted to a nursery. You'll want to see it eventually, I suppose. The casual assumption that I would simply accept this arrangement, that I would accommodate my husband's pregnant mistress in our home, sparked the first flame of anger through my shock. But beneath the anger was something else, a growing awareness that Jasmine's tone held none of the triumph or smugness I might have expected. Instead, she seemed almost resigned. Jasmine, I said carefully, are you here by choice? For the first time since I'd arrived, her composed facade cracked slightly. She looked down at her hands, still wrapped around the now cold tea. That's a complicated question, she said quietly. But I suppose the simple answer is no. Not entirely. I moved back to the table, studying this woman who had somehow become central to the destruction of my marriage. Up close, I could see the fatigue beneath her carefully applied makeup, the tension in her shoulders despite her outward calm. Then perhaps, I said slowly, we need to talk. Jasmine met my eyes, and for a moment, I saw something unexpected there. Relief. Yes, she said simply. I think we do. I made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands, needing the familiar ritual to ground myself in this surreal situation. Jasmine watched me move around my own kitchen with an expression I couldn't quite read, part sympathy, part wariness, part something else entirely. How did you meet him? I asked, settling back into my chair. The question felt both essential and devastating to ask. The marketing conference in Manchester last March, she replied. I was working the registration desk for the venue. He was charming, funny, said he was recently separated. My stomach dropped. Separated. That's what he told me. Said you two had grown apart, that divorce papers were being drawn up but hadn't been finalized yet. Jasmine's voice carried a bitter edge. Very convincing story about how you were focusing on your career and he felt abandoned. I stared at her, pieces of a horrible puzzle beginning to form. March. I remembered that conference. Eric had been gone for 4 days, came back with stories about networking and potential new clients. He'd seemed energized, affectionate even. I'd been pleased he was taking initiative with business development. He's still wearing his wedding ring in those photos from Ibiza, I said quietly. Jasmine's laugh held no humor. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Oh, yes. I noticed that too. Seems his story about being separated was somewhat flexible depending on the audience. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my text exchanges with Eric from the past week. The responses I'd received, what I now knew were Jasmine's responses, were perfectly crafted to sound like him. Casual, mentions of client meetings, complaints about London weather, even an affectionate "miss you too" when I'd sent him a photo of the Singapore skyline. "You're quite good at impersonating him," I said. 8 months of listening to him talk gives you practice. He has very predictable speech patterns. She paused, studying my face. "Avery, how long have you been married?" 4 years. Together? For 6. The words came out automatically, but felt strange now, like describing someone else's life. "We bought this flat 3 years ago. I've been traveling more for work lately, but we were trying to start a family." Jasmine's expression softened slightly. "He told me you couldn't have children, said it was a medical issue." Another lie, another private shame twisted into justification. "There's no medical issue. We've been trying naturally, haven't even started fertility testing yet. My doctor said to give it time." I met her eyes. "When did you find out about me?" 6 weeks ago." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, one hand moving protectively to her bump. "I came to surprise him at work for lunch. His secretary, Megan, I think, she kept staring at me strangely. Finally asked if I was Eric's sister-in-law, said she'd heard he was married but hadn't met his wife yet." "What did Eric say when you confronted him?" "Oh, he had explanations ready." Jasmine's voice turned bitter. "Said Megan was confused, that you were technically still married but emotionally divorced, that he'd been trying to protect my feelings by not mentioning the messy legal situation. He promised me you were out of the picture, that the divorce would be final within months." I felt physically sick. The manipulation, the elaborate construction of lies to maintain both relationships. It spoke to a level of deception I'd never imagined Eric capable of. "But you stayed with him," I observed. Jasmine's hand moved to her stomach again. "I was already 6 months pregnant, Avery. Single mother, working temporary jobs, no family support. Eric promised he'd take care of us, that once his situation was resolved, we'd be a proper family." She looked directly at me. I needed to believe him. And now? Now I'm 7 months pregnant, staying in his wife's spare room while he holidays, in Ibiza with his friends, leaving us both to sort out his mess. Jasmine's composure cracked slightly. "I'm not stupid, Avery. I know he's been playing us both." I stood and walked to the refrigerator, needing movement to process this information. Inside, I found evidence of Jasmine's presence. Different milk, foods I didn't recognize, prenatal vitamins on the top shelf. But I also noticed something else. The fridge was barely stocked. A few ready meals, some fruit, basic essentials. "Has he been supporting you financially?" I asked. Jasmine hesitated. "He gives me money for expenses, but it's sporadic, and never as much as he promises." I thought about our joint account, the automatic transfers I'd set up to ensure our bills were covered while I traveled. Eric had access to everything, managed our day-to-day finances while I focused on my demanding career. I'd trusted him completely. "Jasmine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I turned to face her. "Are you here voluntarily, or did he essentially abandon you here?" Her eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back. "He said I needed somewhere safe to stay while he figured things out, that this flat was technically half his anyway, so I had a right to be here, but—" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He took my keys to my bedsit when I moved out, said he'd handle ending the lease. And when I asked for them back yesterday before he left, he said they were somewhere safe and he'd sort it when he returned. So you can't leave. I have nowhere to go. No money saved because I've been depending on him. My things are in storage. Somewhere. He arranged that too. Jasmine's voice broke slightly. I realize how this sounds, how naive I've been. I sat back down across from her, seeing not my husband's mistress but another woman caught in Eric's web of manipulation and control. The pregnancy made her vulnerable in ways I couldn't fully imagine, but I recognized the pattern of isolation, of having someone else manage the practical details of your life until you found yourself trapped. Jasmine, I said quietly, I don't think either of us is the villain in this story. She looked up at me with surprise, then something that might have been hope. What do you mean? I mean, I think we've both been thoroughly deceived by the same man, and I think it's time we figured out exactly how deep this goes. Show me the nursery, I said, standing with sudden determination. I need to see what he's done to our home. Jasmine hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Avery, perhaps that's not... Please, I need to understand the full scope of this. She led me down the hallway past our bedroom, Eric's and mine, to what had been my home office. I stopped in the doorway, stunned. The room had been completely transformed. My desk, my filing cabinets, my carefully organized client portfolios, everything was gone. In their place stood a white crib, a changing table, a rocking chair, and walls painted in soft yellow with hand-stenciled teddy bears. Where are my things? I whispered. He said he put them in storage, that you wouldn't be needing the office anymore since you'd be... She trailed off. Since I'd be what? He said once the divorce was final, you'd be moving out anyway, that this would be our family home. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. Not only had Eric been planning to leave me, he'd been planning to keep our flat. The flat I'd contributed equally to purchasing, the home we'd chosen together. When did he do this? I asked, running, my fingers along the freshly painted wall. While you were in Singapore, he hired decorators the day after you left. 3 weeks. He'd waited exactly 1 day after my departure to erase my presence from our home and prepare for his new life. The calculated nature of it made me feel physically ill. Jasmine, I need to ask you something difficult. Has Eric ever mentioned anything about my work? My clients? She shifted uncomfortably. He said you were hardly ever home anyway, that your job was more important to you than your marriage. No, I mean specifically about my clients, my business contacts. Well, she looked uncertain. He did ask me to help him with something a few weeks ago. Said he needed access to some client files for a project you'd mentioned. My blood ran cold. What kind of access? Your laptop password. He said you'd changed it and forgotten to tell him, but he needed to check something urgently for work. And you gave it to him? Yes. I'm sorry, Avery. He made it sound like it was completely normal, something you'd want him to handle. I rushed to the bedroom and grabbed my laptop from my travel bag. As it powered up, I explained to Jasmine the nature of my work, how I managed high-value international marketing contracts, had access to confidential client strategies, and maintained sensitive business relationships worth millions of pounds. Oh, God, she breathed as the implications sank in. What do you think he was looking for? My email loaded, and immediately I could see signs of intrusion. Emails had been moved to different folders, some marked as read when I knew I hadn't opened them. My client contact database showed recent access timestamps from while I was traveling. He's been in everything, I said, scrolling through the activity. Logs, client contracts, financial projections, strategic plans. I pulled up my sent folder. Jasmine, look at this. There were emails I hadn't sent, professionally crafted messages to my most valuable clients, sent from my account while I was in Singapore. They were inquiries about upcoming contract renewals, subtle probes about competing agencies, questions about project budgets and timelines. He's been mining my client relationships, I said, the full picture becoming clear. Gathering intelligence about my accounts. But why would he need that information? I opened a new browser window and searched for Eric's company. What I found made my stomach drop. Because he's been planning to start his own competing agency, the website for Waverly, and Associates Marketing had been registered 2 months ago, though it wasn't yet live. But cached pages showed a sophisticated operation promising insider knowledge of international market dynamics and established relationships with premium global brands. Waverly, Jasmine said softly. That's his middle name. He's been using my work, my contacts, my expertise to build his own business, planning to steal my clients once he was free of our marriage. I turned to face her. Jasmine, I think you and I have both been part of his exit strategy. Her face had gone pale. What do you mean? Think about it. He needed access to my work, to steal my business contacts. But he also needed me out of the picture, distracted, discredited, or divorced. Having an affair that results in pregnancy gives him grounds to claim marital breakdown. Meanwhile, he gets me comfortable with traveling more for work, giving him free access to our home and my things. But what about me? What was I supposed to be? His new life, the family he'd start fresh with, funded by the business he built, using my client relationships and professional reputation. I sat heavily on the bed. We were both being used, just in different ways. Jasmine joined me, her breathing slightly labored from the stress. There's something else you should know. Eric has been asking me questions about you. What kind of questions? About your work habits, your travel schedule, which clients you talk about most. He said he wanted to be more supportive of your career, but now... She looked at me with growing alarm. He was gathering information, wasn't he? Probably. What else? He asked about your health, your family medical history, said he was concerned about fertility issues affecting your mental state. Jasmine's voice grew smaller. He made it sound like you might be becoming unstable from the stress. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Eric hadn't just been planning to leave me. He'd been building a narrative that would justify it. The stressed, career-obsessed wife who couldn't have children and was becoming mentally unstable versus the supportive new partner carrying his child. He's been documenting everything, hasn't he? I said. Creating a story that makes him the victim and us the problems he heroically overcame. Jasmine nodded miserably. He keeps a journal, says it helps him process the difficult situation. But I've seen him writing in it after arguments, after phone calls with you. He's been building a case, I said grimly. For the divorce, for keeping the flat, for taking my business contacts. Everything has been calculated. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the full scope of Eric's manipulation. Avery, Jasmine said finally, what are we going to do? I looked at this woman who I'd seen as my rival just hours ago, now recognizing her as another victim of the same careful deception. We're going to fight back, I said. But first, we need to see exactly how deep this goes. I need to check our bank accounts, I said, reaching for my phone with hands that had begun to shake again. If Eric's been planning this for months, there's no way he hasn't been moving money around. Jasmine watched anxiously as I logged into our joint account, the primary account where both our salaries were deposited and from which all our major expenses were paid. The balance made me gasp. What is it? She asked. We had £43,000 in here when I left for Singapore. There's £800 left. I scrolled frantically through the transaction history. Large cash withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, payments to companies I'd never heard of. But what made my blood run cold were the dates. Systematic. Withdrawals beginning the day after I'd left for Singapore, as if Eric had been waiting for me to be safely out of the country. Look at this, I said, showing Jasmine the screen. £5,000 to Henderson Property Solutions on Tuesday, the day he left for Ibiza. $3,000 to Coastal Rentals Ibiza the same day. He's been funding his holiday with our savings. Our savings? Jasmine asked quietly. Money I've been putting aside for 3 years. For our future. For the house we were planning to buy. For... I stopped, the irony too painful to voice. For the family we were trying to start. I opened my personal savings account, the one Eric had access to but rarely used. My heart sank. Further, the account that should have contained £22,000 held just over 3,000. He's taken almost everything, I whispered. But where has it gone? Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. Avery, I think I might know some of this. He's been paying for things for me, for the baby. The nursery furniture, my prenatal care, maternity clothes. He said it was coming from his personal account. It was coming from mine, I said grimly, continuing to scroll through transactions. Look, Baby Bliss Furniture, Harley Street Pregnancy, Clinic, Seraphine Maternity, all paid from our joint account. The betrayal cut deeper with each transaction. Not only had Eric been stealing from me to fund his affair, he'd been using my money to prepare for the family he planned to have. With someone else, there's more, I said, finding additional transfers. £10,000 to something called Waverly Holdings last month. That must be connected to his new business. I grabbed my laptop and began cross-referencing the unfamiliar company names. From our bank statements, Henderson Property Solutions turned out to be a luxury property rental agency. Coastal Rentals Ibiza was self-explanatory, but Waverly Holdings was registered as a limited company, with Eric listed as the sole director. He's been setting up his entire new life using our money, I said, showing Jasmine the corporate registration documents. Look at this address for Waverly Holdings. The registered office was in Canary Wharf, premium business district, expensive rent. I searched the address and found it was a serviced office complex offering prestigious addresses for new businesses. He's been paying for office space since February, I calculated. 3 months before he even told you he was separated. Jasmine looked stricken. Avery, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. This isn't your fault, I interrupted. You couldn't have known. He was using stolen money. But I need to understand the full picture. Has he made any promises to you about financial security, property, anything specific? He said once the divorce was settled, we'd buy a house together, somewhere with a garden for the baby. He showed me estate agent websites, said he'd already started looking at properties in Richmond. I pulled up the estate agent websites for Richmond, an expensive area of southwest London. The properties Eric had been viewing, based on the browsing history I could now access on his laptop, were well beyond what his salary alone could afford. Houses in the 800,000 to 1.2 million range. He was planning to buy these with my money, I said. The money he's been systematically stealing from our accounts. But as I continued digging through our financial records, I discovered something even more sinister. Eric had applied for a mortgage, using our joint financial information, including my salary and credit rating, but listing himself as the sole applicant. Jasmine, look at this. I showed her the mortgage application documents I'd found in his email. He's been approved for a $750,000 mortgage based on our combined income, but I'm not listed as a co-applicant. He would get the house, the mortgage would be in his name only, but my salary and credit history were used to secure the approval. Is that legal? Probably not, but it shows how far ahead he's been planning. He's been using my financial standing to secure his future while simultaneously draining our accounts to fund it. I opened another browser tab and checked our credit report. What I found made me feel sick. Eric had taken out 2 credit cards in the past month, cards that required my co-signature because they were secured against our joint property, but somehow my signature had been provided. He's forged my signature, I said, staring at the documents. These credit card applications show my signature, but I never signed them. Jasmine leaned closer to look. It looks like your signature, though. It's very good, but look at this. I pulled out my passport and compared signatures. See how the A in Avery connects to the V? In these forgeries, there's a slight gap. Someone copied my signature carefully, but not perfectly. The credit cards had limits totaling $25,000, and according to the statements, they were already nearly maxed out. Purchases at high-end restaurants in Manchester, where Jasmine lived, hotel stays in various cities, expensive electronics and jewelry I'd never seen. He's been financing his double life with credit secured against our home, I explained. If these cards default, they could force us to sell the flat to pay them off. Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Avery, what happens to me when all this comes out? I can't work much longer. The baby's due in 6 weeks and I have nowhere to go. I looked at this woman, heavily pregnant, financially dependent, and as manipulated as I had been. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I'm starting to think Eric planned for both of us to be left with nothing while he walked away with everything. What do you mean? Think about it. Once I discover the affair and the missing money, I'd be devastated, focused on divorce proceedings. You'd be a single mother with a newborn, desperate for his support. Both of us would be too distracted and financially vulnerable to challenge him effectively. I met her eyes. We were never meant to work together, Jasmine. We were meant to destroy each other while he escaped with our money and his new business. The silence stretched between us as the full weight of Eric's manipulations settled into the room. Jasmine sat with her hands protectively over her bump, staring at the financial documents scattered across the bed. I could see her processing not just the betrayal, but the precarious position it left her in. I need some air, I said finally, standing and walking to the window. Outside, London carried on as normal, people heading home from work, couples, walking hand in hand, the ordinary rhythm of lives that hadn't been shattered in a single evening. Avery, Jasmine said quietly behind me, I want you to know that if I'd known about the money, about any of this, I would never have participated. I turned to study her face. The defiance from earlier had been replaced by something rawer, fear, shame, and what looked like genuine remorse. I believe you, I said, and realized I meant it. But the question now is, what do we do about it? What can we do? He's taken everything, left us both stranded, and he's thousands of miles away drinking cocktails while we sort through the wreckage. We could fight each other, I said slowly, an idea beginning to form. That's what he's expecting. You could. Demand financial support as the mother of his child. I could demand my money back and file for divorce. We could spend months in legal battles while Eric positions himself as the victim caught between two women. Jasmine nodded miserably. And by the time it's all sorted, his new business would be established using your client contacts, and we'd both be financially ruined from legal fees. Exactly. I moved back to sit beside her on the bed. Or, we could work together, pool our knowledge, combine our evidence, and make sure Eric faces consequences for what he's done to both of us. Jasmine looked at me with surprise. You'd do that? After everything? Jasmine, you're not my enemy. You're another one of his victims. And frankly, we're stronger together than we are fighting each other. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, what would working together look like? First, we stop him from taking anything else. I'm going to contact the bank in the morning and freeze our joint accounts. Then we document everything. Every lie he told you, every financial transaction, every forged signature. And then we make sure he comes home to find his carefully laid plans in ruins instead of two women destroying each other. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, wincing slightly. I want to help, but I need to be practical. This baby is coming whether Eric supports us or not. I can't afford to make an enemy of him if there's any chance he'll do the right thing. Jasmine, look at this evidence. Really look at it. I gestured to the financial documents. Does any of this suggest Eric ever planned to do the right thing? He's been systematically stealing from me for months while making you promises he funded with stolen money. What happens when the money runs out? She placed both hands on her stomach, and I could see her wrestling with the reality of her situation. You think he was planning to abandon both of us? I think Eric is only looking out for Eric, and I think he's been positioning himself to walk away clean while leaving us to deal with the consequences. But the baby will need a mother who isn't financially destroyed by Eric's schemes. If we let him drain every account and steal every asset, what kind of security can you provide your child? The truth of this seemed to hit her. She looked around the nursery he'd created, beautiful, expensive, and paid for with money stolen from his wife. What's the first step? She asked quietly. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Every account, every business registration, every promise he made to either of us. Then we need to document everything in a way that will hold up legally. I have text messages, Jasmine offered. Months of conversations where he talks about the divorce, about our future together, about his business plans. Perfect. And I have financial records, email evidence of his accessing my work accounts, and proof of forged signatures. There's something else, Jasmine said hesitantly. Eric keeps a safe in his study. I've seen him putting documents in there. I don't know the combination, but if there are important papers in there, we need to see them. How would we even— One problem at a time, I said, feeling energized for the first time since coming home. Right now, let's focus on what we can access immediately. I stood and extended my hand to her. Partners? Jasmine looked at my outstretched hand for a long moment, then reached up and shook it firmly. Partners. But Avery, I need you to understand. I'm terrified of being alone, of raising this baby without support, of what Eric might do when he realizes we're working together. I understand. But Jasmine, we're not alone anymore, and Eric has underestimated both of us. As we shook hands, I felt something shift in the room, a sense of purpose replacing the earlier despair. Eric had been counting on our rivalry to distract us from his deception. Instead, he'd given us the motivation to bring him down. Let's start with that safe, I said, leading Jasmine to Eric's study. The room had always been his domain. Dark, wood furniture, leather-bound books he'd never read, and the general aesthetic of a man trying to project success and sophistication. The safe was tucked behind a false panel in the built-in bookshelf, partially concealed but not hidden from someone who knew where to look. It was a small digital model, the kind that required either a code or fingerprint access. Any idea what he might use as a combination? I asked. I've seen him enter it a few times. It's 6 digits, and he types it quickly like it's automatic. Jasmine studied the keypad thoughtfully. Try his birthday. I entered the digits for Eric's birthday. Nothing. His mother's birthday, our wedding anniversary, his graduation date, all failed attempts that resulted in increasingly urgent beeping. Sounds? Wait, Jasmine said suddenly. Try the baby's due date. He's obsessed with it, keeps counting down the days. I entered the date Jasmine provided, and the safe clicked open with a soft electronic chime. Brilliant, I breathed, but my satisfaction turned to shock as I saw what was inside. The safe contained neat stacks of documents in labeled folders, far more organized than Eric usually was with paperwork. But what caught my attention immediately was the cash, thick bundles of 50-pound notes that had clearly been accumulating over time. There must be 10,000 pounds here, Jasmine whispered. At least. I pulled out the cash and set it aside, focusing on the documents underneath. The first folder was labeled A Personal in Eric's handwriting. Inside were photocopies of my passport, birth certificate, and other identity documents. But there were also things that made my blood run cold. My medical records from our family doctor, somehow obtained without my knowledge, and detailed notes in Eric's handwriting about my work schedule, travel patterns, and even my menstrual cycle. He's been tracking everything about me, I said, showing Jasmine the disturbing level of detail. Look at this. He's documented every business trip I've taken for the past year, including which clients I've visited and how long I was away. Jasmine shuddered. That's stalking behavior. The second folder was labeled J Medical and contained Jasmine's pregnancy records, ultrasound images, and doctor's appointments. But it also contained something unexpected, a DNA test requisition form with Eric's signature. Did you take a paternity test? I asked. Jasmine shook her head, confused. No, Eric said we didn't need one. Why would we? We've been together since before I got pregnant. I examined the form more closely. It was dated just 2 weeks ago, but it wasn't a standard paternity test. It was a prenatal genetic screening that could determine paternity before birth, and according to the paperwork, results had already been processed. Jasmine, I think Eric had this test done without telling you. Look at the sample collection date. It matches one of your routine appointments. But why would he? She stopped, understanding dawning on her face. He wasn't sure the baby was his. The third folder contained the most shocking revelations. Labeled Business Waverly, it held the complete business plan for Eric's new company, including client target lists taken directly from my work files. But there was more. Correspondence with lawyers about divorce proceedings, asset protection strategies, and most damning of all, a timeline for what he called Project Liberation. Listen to this, I said, reading from Eric's handwritten notes. Phase 1. Establish alternative income stream using A's client contacts. Phase 2. Secure J's dependency and pregnancy timeline. Phase 3. Document A's instability due to fertility stress and career obsession. Phase 4. Execute separation during A's extended travel period. He's been treating our lives like a business plan, Jasmine said, horrified. It gets worse. Phase 5 is relocate to Richmond property with Jay and child. Establish Waverly as legitimate competitor using insider knowledge. He's literally mapped out how to destroy my life and steal my career. But the most revealing document was at the bottom of the folder, a letter from a private investigator's office. Eric had hired someone to investigate both of us. He had us followed, I said, reading the investigator's report. Look at this. They documented your daily routines, your financial situation, even took photos of you going to prenatal appointments. Why would he need an investigator if he was already involved with both of us? Because he needed ammunition. Look at this section about me. They documented how many hours I work, how often I travel, even noted that I sometimes skip meals when I'm stressed. He was building a case that I'm an absent, potentially unstable wife. And me? I scanned the section about Jasmine. They documented your previous relationships, your employment history, your family situation. They even noted that you don't have close family support or significant savings. He was making sure I was vulnerable enough to control, Jasmine said. Quietly. Exactly. And look at this, the investigator's final recommendation. I read aloud. Subject A appears fully committed to career advancement and shows no awareness of marital issues. Subject J appears emotionally and financially dependent, with limited options for independence. Timeline optimal for clients' objectives. The clinical way Eric had analyzed and manipulated both our lives was breathtaking in its cruelty. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out the final document. It was a copy of a life insurance policy, on me, that Eric had increased to £500,000 just 3 months ago. Jasmine went pale. Avery, that's terrifying, I finished, especially combined with his notes about my supposed instability. We stared at each other in the dim light of Eric's study, surrounded by evidence of manipulation that went far deeper than a simple affair. We're not just dealing with infidelity, I said finally. We're dealing with someone who's been systematically planning to destroy both our lives. We need to copy everything, I said, my hands trembling slightly as I held the life insurance policy. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence. If Eric realizes we've found his safe, he could destroy all of this. Jasmine nodded, though I could see the stress was taking a physical toll on her. She'd gone pale and was breathing more heavily. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Just the baby moving around. I think all this stress is affecting him too." She placed a protective hand over her bump. "But you're right. We need to document everything before Eric gets back." I fetched my scanner from the storage boxes Eric had packed away and set it up in his study. As I began methodically copying each document, Jasmine explored the rest of the safe's contents. "Avery, look at this," she said, pulling out a small digital recorder. "Why would Eric have this?" I paused my scanning to examine the device. It was a high-quality model, the kind used for professional recording. When I pressed play, my own voice filled the room, a phone conversation I'd had with my mother just weeks before leaving for Singapore. "He's been recording my calls," I said, horrified. "Listen, this is me talking about how stressed I've been about our fertility issues, how I sometimes wonder if Eric would be happier with someone else." Jasmine's face showed her disgust. "He's been collecting evidence to use against you." I fast-forwarded through more recordings. Eric had captured me at my most vulnerable moments, crying after another negative pregnancy test, expressing frustration about work pressure, even admitting to my sister that sometimes I felt like Eric was becoming distant. He's been building a narrative, I realized. Every private moment of pain or stress, recorded to paint me as unstable or difficult. "Are there recordings of me?" Jasmine asked quietly. I continued scrolling through the files. There were dozens of recordings of Jasmine, too. Phone conversations where she expressed fears about being a single mother. Moments where she questioned Eric's promises, even recordings of her being sick with morning sickness that Eric had somehow captured. "He's recorded both of us," I said. "But listen to this one." I played a recording that made us both freeze. It was Eric's voice, but he was clearly talking to someone else, a male voice I didn't recognize. "The pregnancy timeline is perfect," Eric's voice said. "Jasmine will be completely dependent by the time the baby arrives, and Avery's business. Tripp gives me the window I need to establish the new accounts. By the time she realizes what's happening, everything will be legally protected." "And you're sure about the client transfers?" the unknown voice asked. "Already started. I've been positioning myself as the primary contact for her biggest accounts. When Waverly launches, they'll follow me naturally. They think they're dealing with the husband of their current account manager. Professional courtesy." "What about the wife? Won't she fight the divorce?" Eric's laugh was cold. "Avery's so focused on her career she barely notices what happens at home. And I've got months of evidence showing her instability around fertility issues. By the time we're done, she'll be lucky to keep half her client base, let alone challenge the settlement." "And the pregnant one?" "Jasmine serves her purpose. The baby gives me leverage for financial support, and she's too isolated to cause problems. Once everything's settled, arrangements can always be adjusted." The recording continued with Eric detailing how he planned to use both our vulnerabilities against us. But I stopped it, feeling sick. "Arrangements can be adjusted," Jasmine repeated, her voice hollow. "What do you think that means?" "Nothing good," I said grimly. "But Jasmine, we know now. Whatever he was planning, we're ahead of it." I continued scanning documents while Jasmine listened to more recordings. What emerged was a picture of meticulous planning that went back nearly a year. Eric had been documenting our every weakness, recording our private conversations, and building cases against both of us long before his relationship with Jasmine had even begun. "Look at this," Jasmine said, holding up a notebook I'd missed. "It's like a psychological profile. He's written down everything about our personalities, our fears, our triggers." I read over her shoulder. Eric had cataloged my workaholic tendencies, my sensitivity about fertility issues, my trust in him to manage household finances. For Jasmine, he'd noted her desire for family stability, her fear of being alone, her limited support network. He studied us, I said, like we were specimens in an experiment. There's more. Look at this timeline. Jasmine pointed to a detailed schedule Eric had created. He planned everything down to the week. When to increase your life insurance, when to start the affair with me, when to apply for business loans using your credit, even when to schedule his Ibiza trip. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't a man who'd fallen into an affair and made poor choices. This was someone who'd orchestrated the destruction of multiple lives with clinical precision. We need help, I said finally. This is beyond what two people can handle alone. Eric isn't just cheating and stealing. He's been conducting a sophisticated fraud operation. Who can we call? Who would believe all this? I thought about the evidence we'd gathered: financial fraud, identity theft, potentially illegal surveillance, forgery. We need a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. We need someone who specializes in financial crimes. Can we afford that? I gestured to the cash from Eric's safe. We can afford it with his own money. And after what we found, I think any lawyer would be very interested in this case. As I finished copying the last of Eric's documents, Jasmine sat heavily in his leather chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. I need to tell you something, she said quietly, about how this all really started. I looked up from organizing our evidence files. What do you mean? The conference in Manchester, it wasn't random. Eric targeted me specifically. She took a shaky breath. I was working temporary jobs then, barely making ends meet after my ex left me with debt from our flat. Eric noticed I was wearing the same dress 2 days in a row, that I was skipping lunch breaks. He looked for someone vulnerable. Exactly. But I didn't realize how calculated it was until tonight, reading his notes about my limited support, network, and financial dependency potential. Jasmine's voice carried a bitter edge. He asked me about my family on our first date. When I told him my parents died in a car accident 3 years ago and I had no siblings, I thought he was being caring. Now I know he was collecting data. I sat down across from her, recognizing a pattern I'd been blind to in my own relationship. When did you first notice him trying to control things? Small things at first. He'd suggest restaurants, then pay before I could object. When I mentioned looking for a more stable job, he offered to help with my expenses while I focused on finding the right opportunity. It felt like kindness, but it created dependency. Within 2 months, I'd stopped looking for permanent work because Eric was covering my rent. He said it was temporary just until I found something perfect. Then I found out I was pregnant, and suddenly any job search became too stressful for the baby. I thought about my own relationship with Eric, seeing now how he'd used similar tactics with me. He did something similar when we got married. Suggested I work from home to save on studio rent, then gradually made me dependent on our joint accounts for business expenses. The isolation was gradual too, Jasmine continued. He'd point out that my friends were negative influences who didn't understand our relationship. When I mentioned missing my old social circle, he'd plan romantic weekends away or surprise me with expensive gifts. He separated you from anyone who might question his behavior. Yes, and the pregnancy made it worse. He became obsessed with my health, insisted on accompanying me to appointments, said he was worried about me making decisions without proper support. Jasmine's hand moved protectively to her stomach. I thought he was being devoted. Looking back, he was ensuring I couldn't build relationships with medical professionals who might advocate for me. I felt a chill of recognition. Eric did something similar with my work colleagues. He'd attend company events, charm everyone, position himself as the supportive husband. But then he'd make subtle comments about how stressed my job made me, how it was affecting my health. Building a narrative that you weren't coping well? Exactly. And because everyone liked him, they started watching for signs that I was struggling. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more they watched for problems, the more self-conscious I became, which looked like instability. Jasmine nodded grimly. He used my pregnancy the same way, constantly asking if I was feeling overwhelmed, if I was sure I could handle things. When I'd get frustrated or emotional, which is normal when you're pregnant, he'd make notes about my mood swings and difficulty managing stress. The recordings make sense now, I said. He wasn't just collecting evidence. He was documenting the psychological pressure he was putting on both of us. There's something else, Jasmine said hesitantly. About the baby. I tensed, not sure I wanted to hear whatever revelation was coming. The due date Eric gave you, it's wrong. I'm actually 8.5 months pregnant, not 7. What does that mean? It means I got pregnant before the Manchester conference. Before I'd even met Eric. Jasmine's voice was barely above a whisper. The baby isn't his. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Then why, my ex, River? We broke up badly. He was emotionally abusive, financially irresponsible. When I found out I was pregnant after we'd separated, I was terrified of having to co-parent with him. When Eric came along and seemed so caring, so stable, you let him believe the baby was his. At first, yes. But then I tried to tell him the truth when we got serious. He wouldn't listen, said he didn't care about timing, that he wanted to be the baby's father regardless. Jasmine wiped tears from her eyes. I thought it meant he loved me. Now I realize he needed a pregnant woman for his plan to work, and the biological father was irrelevant. Does River know about the pregnancy? No. And I can't contact him now even if I wanted to. Eric changed my phone number months ago, said it was for security reasons. All my old contacts are lost. I stared at her, processing this revelation. Eric had built his entire manipulation around a lie, but he'd embraced that lie because it served his purposes. A pregnant mistress made him sympathetic in his divorce proceedings. The actual paternity was irrelevant to his scheme. Jasmine, this changes everything, I said slowly. If Eric isn't the biological father, he has no legal claim to your child, no leverage over you. But he doesn't know that. And he's put so much energy into positioning himself as the devoted father-to-be. That's his weakness, I realized. His entire plan depends on being the baby's father. When the truth comes out, everything unravels. We need to understand Eric's complete financial picture, I said, energized by this new revelation about the baby's paternity. If we're going to expose him, we need to know exactly what assets he's hidden and where he's vulnerable. I pulled up Eric's laptop, which he'd carelessly left behind, apparently confident that his password protection was sufficient. But months of watching him type had given me insight into his patterns, and his password turned out to be a variation of his company registration number. Look at this, I said, opening his email. He's been corresponding with offshore banking consultants. The email chain revealed a sophisticated financial structure that took my breath away. Eric hadn't just been stealing our money, he'd been moving it through a network of accounts designed to hide assets from potential legal challenges. Cayman Islands, I read aloud. Isle of Man, Jersey. He's got accounts in 3 different tax havens. Jasmine leaned over my shoulder, studying the screen. How much money are we talking about? I scrolled through the bank statements Eric had foolishly saved in his email. At least £200,000, and that's just what I can see from these statements. 200,000? But he only took about 60,000 from your accounts. He's been planning this for longer than we thought. Look at these dates. Some of these transfers go back 18 months. He's been siphoning money gradually, probably skimming from his own business accounts too. I opened another email thread between Eric and someone identified only as financial. Advisor, Zurich. The conversation was in careful, coded language, but the meaning was clear. Eric had been establishing residency requirements for Switzerland as a backup plan. He's got an exit strategy, I said grimly. If everything falls apart, he can flee to Switzerland where UK divorce courts can't touch his hidden assets. But wouldn't authorities be able to track this if you reported it? Maybe eventually, but by then he'd have had months to move the money again. These offshore accounts are specifically designed to make recovery difficult. I continued reading, through his financial correspondence. But Eric's made one crucial mistake. What's that? He's documented everything. Look at this spreadsheet he's been maintaining. I opened a file labeled Asset Protection Timeline. Eric had meticulously tracked every transfer, every account opening, every step of his financial hiding scheme. Why would he keep such detailed records? Because he needed to manage it all somehow. When you're juggling multiple offshore accounts and investment vehicles, you need documentation to keep track. But this spreadsheet is also a complete confession of financial fraud. I scrolled through the spreadsheet, noting particular entries. Look at this. Transferred $15K from joint account during A's Frankfurt trip. And this one, moved Jay's maternity account funds to Cayman Holdings. He's even documented money that technically belonged to you. Money that belonged to me? The account he set up for your maternity expenses. According to this, he's been using those funds as capital for his offshore investments, then replacing just enough to cover immediate expenses. Jasmine looked stricken. So, when the baby comes and we need money for hospital bills, equipment, childcare, there might not be anything left in those accounts. He's been gambling with money earmarked for your child's care. But as I dug deeper into Eric's financial records, I discovered something even more significant. Hidden in a subfolder marked Insurance, Personal, were policies I'd never seen before. Jasmine, Eric's been taking out life insurance policies on both of us. What do you mean? Look at this. A $250,000 policy on you taken out just 2 months ago. The beneficiary is listed as Waverly Holdings, his business entity. Jasmine went pale. He insured my life for his business? And look at the application details. He listed you as having a high-risk pregnancy with complications. That's not true, is it? No. My pregnancy has been completely normal. All my checkups have been fine. So he lied to get a higher risk policy approved, which means higher payouts if something happens to you. I felt sick as the implications sank. Combined with the increased policy on me, Eric stands to gain £750,000 if both of us were to have accidents. That's... Jasmine couldn't finish the sentence. Motive for murder, I said quietly. Especially since he's documented both of us as mentally unstable and financially irresponsible in his private records. I continued exploring Eric's files and found more evidence of his long-term planning. Property searches for homes in non-extradition countries, research into fake identity documents, even inquiries about private schools in Switzerland for future family expansion. He's been planning to disappear completely, I said. New identity, new country, millions in hidden assets, and the insurance policies suggest he never intended for us to be around to complicate his new life. But wait, Jasmine said, pointing to another section of the spreadsheet. Look at this entry. Contingency, J deportation option. I clicked on the linked document. It was correspondence with an immigration lawyer about reporting Jasmine as an illegal immigrant, despite the fact that she was a British citizen. He was planning to have you deported, I asked, incredulous. I was born in Dublin but moved here as a child. I have dual citizenship, but Eric insisted on handling all my paperwork when we got serious. He said it was romantic, taking care of administrative details. He's been collecting your identity documents to use against you. If you became inconvenient, he could create a fake immigration case to have you removed from the country. With the baby. With his supposed son, yes. He'd get custody by default if you were deported, then he'd have legal claim to any child support or benefits. We sat in stunned silence, processing the sheer scope of Eric's planning. This wasn't just financial fraud or relationship manipulation, it was a comprehensive scheme to control, exploit, and potentially eliminate both of us while securing his own wealth and freedom. Avery, Jasmine said finally, we're not just dealing with a cheating husband. We're dealing with someone who's planned our destruction down to the last detail. We can't handle this alone anymore, I said, staring at the overwhelming evidence of Eric's criminal enterprise spread across his desk. This is organized financial crime, fraud, potentially conspiracy to commit murder. We need professional help. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her chair, one hand pressed to her lower back. But who do we call? The police? A lawyer? And how? Do we prove any of this without admitting we broke into his safe? We didn't break in, I corrected. You knew the combination. As his partner and the mother of the child he believes is his, you had legitimate access to documents that concerned your welfare. Is that legal? We'll find out. But first we need someone who specializes in complex financial crimes. I pulled out my phone and began searching for law firms in London that handled fraud cases. Look at this. Morrison, Fletcher & Associates. They specialize in offshore financial fraud and have a 24-hour consultation line. It's nearly midnight, Avery. 4. Cases involving potential physical danger, they take emergency calls. I showed her the firm's website. And this definitely qualifies. I dialed the number, and after explaining the urgent nature of our situation to an answering service, we were connected to Patricia Morrison herself, a senior partner who agreed to an immediate video consultation. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in front of Eric's laptop, sharing our screen with a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, who listened with increasing intensity as we outlined our discoveries. You've uncovered what appears to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise, Patricia said when we finished our presentation. The offshore accounts, life insurance fraud, identity theft, and documented planning suggest this goes far beyond simple marital infidelity. What are our options? I asked. First, we need to secure all this evidence legally. I'm sending you protocols for documenting everything in a way that will be admissible in court. Second, we need to freeze Eric's assets before he can move them again. Can we do that while he's out of the country? With evidence of fraud and flight risk, yes. But we need to move quickly. I'll file emergency injunctions first thing in the morning, but tonight you need to preserve everything exactly as you found it. Patricia walked us through the process of photographing the safe's contents in situ, documenting the original positions of documents, and creating a chain of custody record that would satisfy legal requirements. Now, Patricia continued, about your personal safety. The life insurance policies combined with the offshore accounts and planned deportation suggest Eric may have been considering permanent solutions to his problems with both of you. Jasmine paled. You think he was planning to kill us? I think. He was keeping his options open, which means we need to ensure he can't exercise those options. Patricia's expression was grave. I'm arranging for personal security for both of you, and we'll be notifying the authorities about potential threats. What about when Eric returns from Ibiza? I asked. He won't be returning to business as usual. By the time his flight lands, we'll have frozen his accounts, secured the evidence, and filed charges for multiple felonies. But that means we have exactly 6 days to build an airtight case. Patricia assigned us specific tasks for the following day. I would work with her, financial crimes specialist, to trace all of Eric's hidden assets. Jasmine would meet with their immigration lawyer to secure her legal status and ensure Eric couldn't use her documentation against her. There's one more thing, I said. The baby isn't Eric's biological child. Patricia paused, clearly recalculating the legal implications. That's actually very good news for your case, Jasmine. It means Eric has no legal claim to your child, and it exposes his entire paternity narrative as fraudulent. But he doesn't know that yet, Jasmine added, which gives us leverage. Eric's entire plan depends on being able to control both of you. Through legal claims, marital assets in Avery's case, parental rights in yours. If we can eliminate his legal standing with the child while securing the financial evidence, his position becomes untenable. Patricia outlined our strategy for the next few days. We would gather additional evidence, file restraining orders, secure the assets, and prepare criminal charges. When Eric returned, he would find himself facing prosecution rather than congratulations on his successful manipulation. One crucial point, Patricia emphasized. Eric cannot know you're working together or that you've discovered his plans. If he realizes his scheme is exposed, he might accelerate his timeline or take drastic action. What does that mean for us practically? I asked. You continue living in the flat together, but you document everything. Every phone call, every text, message, every interaction. When Eric contacts either of you from Ibiza, respond normally, but record everything. Can we use his own recording equipment? Jasmine asked. Absolutely. In fact, that's perfect. We'll use his surveillance system against him. After ending the call with Patricia, Jasmine and I sat in Eric's study surrounded by evidence of his crimes, feeling for the first time that we had a real chance of stopping him. I can't believe we're actually doing this, Jasmine said. We're not just doing this, I replied. We're going to win. Eric planned for every contingency except the one that actually happened. What's that? His victims working together instead of destroying each other. The next morning brought our first test. Eric's phone, which he'd left behind for Jasmine to manage his communications, buzzed with an incoming video call from Ibiza. Jasmine and I looked at each other across the breakfast table, both understanding that our performance had to be flawless. Remember, I whispered, we know nothing about each other except what he's told us. We're supposed to be enemies, not allies. Jasmine nodded, quickly messing up her hair and pinching her cheeks to look distressed. I positioned myself in the background, deliberately visible but trying to appear like I was avoiding the conversation. Good morning, gorgeous. Eric's voice filled the kitchen as Jasmine answered the call. He was clearly on a hotel balcony, shirtless and tanned, a mimosa in his hand despite the early hour. Eric, Jasmine said, injecting just the right amount of neediness into her voice. I'm so glad you called. Things have been difficult here. What's wrong? Is the baby okay? The baby's fine, but Avery... Jasmine glanced toward me with manufactured hostility. She's been asking questions, going through papers. I think she suspects something. I could see Eric's expression sharpen with interest, even through the slightly pixelated video connection. What kind of questions? About money, about how long I've been staying here. She found some of my prenatal appointment cards and started demanding explanations. Jasmine was brilliant, mixing truth with misdirection. I tried to follow your advice about keeping things vague, but she's persistent. Has she said anything about divorce? Not directly, but she's been making phone calls. Legal consultations, I think. She keeps taking calls in the bedroom with the door closed. This was true. I had been making legal calls, just not the kind Eric would expect. But he didn't need to know that. Shit, Eric muttered, and I could see him thinking quickly. Okay, listen carefully. If Avery starts getting too aggressive, you need to document it. Use your phone to record any confrontations. We need evidence that she's unstable, potentially dangerous to you and the baby. She hasn't been dangerous, Jasmine protested, playing her role perfectly. Just suspicious. And hurt, I think. Hurt people do unpredictable things, especially when they're facing losing everything. Promise me you'll be careful. I will. But Eric, when are you coming home? I feel so vulnerable here, especially with her being hostile. A few more days, sweetheart. This trip is important for establishing some business connections, but I'll cut it short if things get worse. In the background, I made a point of walking through the kitchen, deliberately creating tension. Eric noticed immediately. Is that her now? Yes, Jasmine whispered. She's been like this all morning, hovering around, watching everything I do. I played my part, stopping near the camera's range and speaking loudly enough for Eric to hear. Jasmine, we need to talk about the arrangement here. This situation isn't sustainable. See? Jasmine said into the phone. She's getting more confrontational. Eric's face showed satisfaction rather than concern. Put me on speaker. I'll handle this. Jasmine reluctantly switched to speaker mode, and Eric's voice filled the kitchen with false authority. Avery, I can hear you're upset, and I understand. This is a difficult situation for everyone. I took a deep breath and channeled my genuine anger, letting it fuel my performance. Difficult? Eric, you left me a note. A note. After 6 years together, I come home to find a pregnant stranger in our flat and a note saying you've gone on holiday. I know it's not ideal timing, but Jasmine needed support and you were traveling anyway. Don't. I interrupted, my voice shaking with very real emotion. Don't try to make this about my work schedule. You've been lying to me for months. Avery, you're getting emotional. This is exactly the kind of reaction that concerns me about your mental state lately. The casual cruelty of that comment, designed to gaslight me while being recorded, made my performance even more authentic. My mental state? My mental state? I laughed bitterly. Eric, you've stolen our savings, moved your pregnant girlfriend into our home, and disappeared to Ibiza. But I'm the one with mental health issues? See what I mean? Eric said to Jasmine, loud enough for me to hear. This is exactly the kind of irrational escalation I was worried about. I stormed out of the kitchen, making sure my footsteps were audible as I went to the bedroom and slammed the door. Through the thin walls, I could hear Eric comforting Jasmine and reinforcing his narrative about my instability. That was perfect, he told her. Keep recording these outbursts. Document everything, her mood swings, any threats, any signs that she might be dangerous to you or the baby. I don't think she'd hurt us physically, Jasmine said carefully. You never know with someone who's having a psychological breakdown. The fertility issues, the work stress, now this. It's a lot for someone to handle rationally. 20 minutes. Later, after Eric ended the call with promises to return soon and take care of everything, Jasmine found me in the bedroom where I was genuinely shaking from the encounter. That was horrible, I said. Listening to him manipulate the situation. Gaslight me, set us up to destroy each other. But it worked, Jasmine replied grimly. He thinks everything is going according to his plan. We're supposed to be at each other's throats while he collects evidence of your breakdown. And instead, we're building evidence of his criminal conspiracy. I looked at the recording device we'd hidden in the kitchen. Patricia is going to love hearing him coaching you to frame me for mental instability. We need more than just recordings and documents, Patricia explained during our afternoon consultation. Courts love independent witnesses, people who can testify to patterns of behavior without any obvious bias. But who would have witnessed Eric's behavior? I asked. He's been careful to maintain his public image. You'd be surprised how much people notice, especially neighbors and service providers. They often see things that family and friends miss because they're not emotionally invested. Patricia suggested we start with our building's residents and local businesses where Eric was known. Focus on anyone who might have observed his comings and goings, especially during times that contradict his claimed timeline. Our first stop was Mrs. Chen from the flat below ours. The elderly woman who walked her corgi daily had always been friendly, and I hope she might have noticed unusual activity. Oh yes, dear, Mrs. Chen said when I knocked on her door with Jasmine, beside me. I've been wondering about all the strange goings-on upstairs. Strange how? Jasmine asked. Well, the decorating for one thing. All those workmen coming and going while you were away, Avery. Very loud, very disruptive. And the furniture deliveries. Baby furniture by the looks of it. When exactly was this happening? I asked, though I already knew. Started the day after. You left for your business trip. I remember because I was going to complain about the noise, but Eric said it was a surprise renovation for your return. Jasmine and I exchanged glances. Another lie Eric had prepared in advance. And there was. That young man with the van, Mrs. Chen continued, took away several boxes and a filing cabinet. Eric supervised the whole thing, seemed very particular about which boxes went where. Do you remember what day that was? Tuesday afternoon, just before he left for his holiday. I saw him loading suitcases into a taxi around 6. This contradicted Eric's claim that he'd left Tuesday morning. He'd spent Tuesday afternoon removing my work materials, then left for Ibiza in the evening, giving himself time to ensure I couldn't recover my files. Our next stop was the local restaurant where Eric often ordered takeaway. The manager, Hassan, greeted me warmly. Avery, we haven't seen you in weeks. How was your business trip? Enlightening, I said carefully. Hassan, I need to ask you about my husband's recent orders. Has he been ordering for 2 people? Hassan looked confused. For 2? No, Eric always orders single portions. But lately, he's been ordering different things. Pregnancy cravings, he said. Very specific requests for pickles, ice cream, strange combinations. How long has this been going on? Maybe 3 months? He said his wife was having unusual food desires but was too embarrassed to come in herself. Hassan's expression grew, concerned. Is everything all right? I realized Eric had been creating a false narrative even with local businesses, positioning himself as the caring husband dealing with a pregnant wife's demands. Except the pregnant woman wasn't his wife. At the pharmacy where I occasionally picked up prescriptions, the pharmacist David revealed another piece of the puzzle. Your husband's been very attentive lately, David commented when I asked about recent visits. Collecting prenatal vitamins, asking questions about pregnancy supplements, very concerned about proper nutrition. Has he mentioned any concerns? About my mental health? I asked carefully. David hesitated. Well, he did ask about interactions between antidepressants and fertility medications. Said he was worried about your stress levels affecting your ability to conceive. Another fabrication. I wasn't taking antidepressants, but Eric had been planting seeds of concern about my mental state throughout our neighborhood. The most revealing conversation came from James, the building's doorman, who worked the evening shift. That husband of yours is quite the ladies' man, James said with a knowing wink when we approached him during his break. What do you mean? Jasmine asked. Well, no offense, love, James said to Jasmine, but you're not the first pregnant lady he's brought around. My blood ran cold. There was someone else? About 6 months ago, different girl, also pregnant. Very upset she was, crying in the lobby one evening. Your husband was trying to calm her down, promising her something about financial support. What happened to her? Jasmine whispered. Don't know. Never saw her again after that night. But she was definitely further along than you are now. Looked ready to pop, if you ask me. Jasmine gripped my arm tightly. We were both thinking the same thing. Eric had done this before. The pattern of targeting vulnerable pregnant women, making promises, then discarding them when they became inconvenient. James, I said carefully, if we needed you to testify about what you witnessed, would you be willing? Testify? What kind of trouble is Eric in? The kind that involves fraud, manipulation, and potentially endangering women and children. James looked between Jasmine and me, understanding dawning on his face. He's been playing you both, hasn't he? Among other things. Then yes, I'll testify. I've got 2 daughters myself. If some bloke was treating them the way Eric's been treating you ladies, I'd want someone to speak up. By the end of the day, we had statements from 6 different witnesses who could testify to Eric's deceptive behavior, his careful manipulation of timelines, and most damning of all, evidence that this wasn't his first time targeting pregnant women. This pattern is crucial Patricia explained when we reported our findings. It shows premeditation and establishes Eric as a serial predator rather than someone who made a single poor choice. What about the other woman James mentioned? Jasmine asked. We'll find her. With Eric's financial records and this witness testimony, we can trace his previous victims. My guess is she's not the only one. By Thursday morning, Patricia's team had traced 3 more women who fit Eric's victim profile. Each had been targeted during vulnerable periods, recent breakups, financial difficulties, or pregnancy complications. The pattern was so consistent, it could have been a manual for predatory behavior. We've managed to contact 2 of them, Patricia reported during our morning briefing. Both are willing to testify. They thought they were his only victims. The first woman, Megan Hartley, had been involved with Eric 18 months ago. She'd been 7 months pregnant with her ex-partner's child when Eric convinced her he wanted to raise the baby as his own. After 3 months of promises and financial support, he'd disappeared completely, leaving her with debt from the expensive maternity care he'd insisted she deserved. Megan kept everything, Patricia continued. Text messages, emails, even recordings of phone calls where Eric promised to support her and the baby. His language is almost identical to what he used with Jasmine. The second woman, Vanessa Wright, had been caring for her elderly mother with dementia when Eric targeted her. He'd offered to help with care costs and eventually moved into their home to support the family. Over 6 months, he'd systematically drained the mother's savings account, then convinced Vanessa to transfer her mother to a state facility while he maintained control of the finances. The mother died 3 weeks after the transfer, Patricia said grimly. Vanessa believes Eric deliberately delayed her medication to accelerate the decline. That's murder, Jasmine breathed. Potentially, but proving it would be difficult. However, it establishes a pattern of targeting vulnerable women and their dependents for financial exploitation. The evidence was overwhelming, but Patricia warned us that the most dangerous phase was still ahead. Tomorrow, we file all charges simultaneously: fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, conspiracy, and potentially attempted murder. But Eric will likely get word of the charges before he lands on Saturday. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means Friday night is when he's most likely to panic and make desperate choices. If he's going to accelerate his timeline for eliminating problems, it would be then. Patricia had arranged for discreet security surveillance of our building, but she emphasized that our own vigilance was crucial. Don't eat or drink anything that hasn't been prepared by yourselves. Don't answer the door for any unexpected visitors. And if Eric changes his return date, contact me immediately. That afternoon, we completed the final legal preparations. I signed power of attorney documents allowing Patricia to freeze Eric's accounts and initiate asset recovery proceedings. Jasmine signed statements formally rejecting any financial claims Eric might make regarding her pregnancy, while establishing her right to remain in the UK regardless of Eric's immigration threats. There's one more thing we need to address, Patricia said as we finished the paperwork. The insurance policies. Eric has made both of you worth more dead than alive to him. We need to make sure he can't benefit from those policies under any circumstances. She'd prepared policy cancellation requests for both insurance companies, but explained that Eric would need to be notified of the cancellations, potentially triggering his panic response. We'll time the cancellation notices to arrive just after his arrest, Patricia decided. But until then, you're both at significant risk. That evening, as Jasmine and I prepared what might be our last night alone in the flat, we performed one final check of all our evidence. The safe in Eric's study now contained only copies. We'd removed all original documents to Patricia's secure office. The recording equipment was still in place, ready to capture any conversations when Eric returned. I can't believe this all. Started 4 days ago, Jasmine said as we sat in the living room, surrounded by the meticulous documentation of Eric's crimes. 4 days ago, I thought my biggest problem was coming home to an empty flat and a ruined Thanksgiving dinner, I replied. Now we're preparing to bring down a criminal enterprise. Do you think he suspected we'd work together? No, that's been his fatal mistake from the beginning. He assumed we'd be too jealous and angry to see past our immediate emotional reactions. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, one hand pressed to her stomach. The baby's been moving around all day. I think he can sense the stress. After tomorrow, you'll be free to raise your child without looking over your shoulder. River's baby, not Eric's. I've been thinking about that. About contacting River after this is all over. What will you tell him? The truth. That I was scared and made poor choices, but that I want him to know about his son. Jasmine's voice was thoughtful. Maybe we can't be together again, but every child deserves to know their real father. That's very mature of you. Eric taught me something valuable, even if he didn't mean to. I learned the difference between someone who wants to control you and someone who wants to support you. When I do get involved with someone again, I'll know what real partnership looks like. As if summoned by our conversation about partnership, my phone buzzed with a final text from Patricia. All charges filed, arrest warrant issued, security in place. Tomorrow we end this. I showed the message to Jasmine, and we sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the magnitude of what we'd accomplished together. Whatever happens tomorrow, Jasmine said, I want you to know that these few days with you have been the first time in months I've felt like myself again. Me too, I replied. Eric tried to isolate both of us, but instead, he gave us exactly what we needed. Each other. Friday morning arrived with an unexpected phone call that changed everything. Eric's voice, tight with barely controlled panic, crackled through the speaker as Jasmine answered his call on the kitchen table where we'd been having breakfast. I need to come home early, he said without preamble. There's been a complication with some business accounts. Jasmine and I exchanged alarmed glances. Patricia had warned us that Eric might get advance warning of the legal proceedings, but we'd hoped for more time. What kind of complication? Jasmine asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Someone's been making inquiries about my financial arrangements. Probably Avery's doing. I told you she was becoming unstable. Eric's voice carried an edge of desperation masked as anger. I need to get back and sort this out before she causes more damage. I gestured frantically toward the recording equipment we'd positioned around the kitchen. This could be the confession we needed. When will you be back? Jasmine asked. I'm catching the earliest flight I can get, probably landing tonight around 10. Don't tell Avery. I want to handle this situation myself. Eric, you're scaring me. What exactly is happening? Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just some legal nonsense that needs to be cleared up. But listen carefully. If anyone comes to the flat asking questions about me, you don't know anything about business matters. You're just staying there temporarily because of the pregnancy. What kind of questions? Financial questions, about accounts, transactions, anything like that. You're pregnant and stressed. You don't pay attention to business details. The irony of Eric coaching Jasmine to play ignorant about the very evidence we'd spent days cataloging was almost laughable, if it weren't so sinister. I'll be careful, Jasmine promised. But Eric, what if Avery becomes more hostile? She's been asking more questions about money, about how long I'm staying here. Don't engage with her at all. Stay in the nursery, keep the door locked if you have to. I'll deal with Avery when I get back. The menace in his tone sent a chill through both of us. Whatever Eric was planning to do about his Avery problem, it wasn't going to be a civil conversation. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Patricia while Jasmine began gathering her essential belongings. He knows, I told Patricia. Eric's coming back tonight and he's panicking. He told Jasmine to avoid me completely and mentioned dealing with me when he returns. The charges were filed this morning, but the arrest warrant won't be executed. Until he actually lands, Patricia explained. Border Control has been notified, but if Eric suspects he's walking into a trap, he might not board that plane. Then we need to make sure he does board it. Exactly. Can you maintain the pretense for a few more hours? Make him believe he's still in control of the situation? We can try. But Patricia, if Eric really believes I'm the threat to his plans, what's he likely to do when he gets here? The pause before Patricia answered told me everything I needed to know. Enhanced security is being positioned around your building starting this afternoon. Don't let Eric into the flat alone. If he returns, make sure you're both together and that someone else can hear any conversation. And if he tries to get violent, you have panic buttons linked directly to police response. Use them if you feel even slightly threatened. After ending the call with Patricia, Jasmine and I spent the afternoon in careful preparation. We moved all of Jasmine's belongings to the master bedroom. If Eric insisted on separating us, at least we'd be in the same space. We tested the panic. Buttons Patricia's team had installed and confirmed that our phone calls were being monitored for emergency keywords. Most importantly, we rehearsed our final performance. When Eric arrived, we needed to appear exactly as he expected. Two women at odds with each other, focused on our own grievances rather than uncovering his crimes. Remember, I told Jasmine as evening approached, you're supposed to be relieved he's back to handle the unstable wife situation. I'm supposed to be defensive and angry about his prolonged absence. And neither of us knows about the criminal charges being filed. Right. We're just two women caught up in a messy domestic situation, not the architects of his downfall. As darkness fell, we positioned ourselves in the living room to wait. Jasmine sat in Eric's chair, practicing looking appropriately distressed and dependent. I paced near the windows, channeling my genuine anxiety into the performance of an angry, abandoned wife. Avery, Jasmine said quietly as we waited. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know. Working with you these past few days has been the bravest thing I've ever done. We're not finished yet, I replied. But yes, it's been brave. And after tonight, we'll both be free. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Landing now, don't wait up. 13 minutes later, we heard his key in the lock. The final confrontation was about to begin. Eric's footsteps in the hallway were heavier than usual, lacking his typical confident stride. When he appeared in the living room doorway, I was struck by how different he looked, sunburned but pale underneath, his usual charm replaced by something harder and more desperate. Jasmine, he said, barely acknowledging my presence. Are you all right? Has she been bothering you? Eric, thank God you're back, Jasmine said, rising from the chair with convincing relief. Things have been so tense here. Eric's eyes fixed on me with an intensity I'd never seen before. Avery, we need to talk. Privately. No, I said firmly, letting my genuine fear fuel my performance. If you have something to say, you can say it in front of Jasmine. She's living in our home, apparently permanently, so she might as well hear whatever justification you've prepared. This isn't about Jasmine. This is about the calls you've been making, the people you've been talking to about our private business. I felt the weight of the panic button in my pocket, but forced myself to remain calm. What calls? You mean calling lawyers about our marriage? About the fact that you emptied our bank accounts and moved your pregnant girlfriend into our flat? You've been digging into things that don't concern you. My husband's financial fraud concerns me very much, Eric. His jaw tightened. There's no fraud. I moved some money around for investment purposes. Perfectly legal. Offshore accounts? Forged signatures? Life insurance policies I never agreed to? I watched his face carefully. Yes, Eric, I found out about all of it. The change in his expression was instant and chilling. The mask of reasonable concern dropped completely, replaced by cold calculation. You went through my private papers. I went through our joint financial documents. Amazing what you can discover when you actually look at where your money's been going. Eric turned to Jasmine, and I saw him switch tactics. Sweetheart, I need you to go to the nursery. Lock the door. This conversation is going to get unpleasant. No, Jasmine said, surprising both of us with her firmness. I'm staying here. If this affects our future together, I need to hear it. Jasmine, this is for your protection. From what? From learning the truth about who you really are? Eric's control began to crack. You don't understand what you're interfering with. Either of you. The arrangements I've made, the planning, you're going to destroy everything. Good, I said. That's exactly what we intend to do. We? Eric's voice dropped to a whisper. Did you really think we'd spend a week together and not compare notes about your lies? Jasmine stood, moving closer to me. About the money you stole, the women you've manipulated, the baby you know isn't yours? Eric went completely still. What did you say? The baby isn't yours, Eric. It never was. Your entire plan was based on a lie. For a moment, Eric said nothing. Then he began to laugh, a sound completely devoid of humor. You stupid women, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've done. What we've done? I repeated, my voice steady despite the menace radiating from Eric. We've exposed a criminal enterprise. Your criminal enterprise. Eric's laugh died abruptly. You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing detective, gathering evidence. But you missed the most important detail. Which is? The timing. Eric pulled out his phone, checking something on the screen. While you two were busy bonding over your shared victimhood, I've been liquidating the remaining offshore accounts. Every penny transferred to untraceable cryptocurrency this afternoon. Jasmine paled. What does that mean? It means your little legal crusade is pointless, Eric said, his confidence returning. You can have all the evidence you want. There's nothing left to recover. I felt a moment of panic before remembering Patricia's assurances. Eric, those accounts were frozen this morning. You couldn't have accessed them. Is that what your lawyer told you? Eric's smile was predatory. Avery, you always were too trusting. Those weren't my only accounts. He opened his phone and showed us a banking app displaying a balance that made my stomach drop. Nearly £500,000 marked as transferred successfully just hours ago. You see, while you were collecting evidence about Waverly Holdings and my little Cayman Islands setup, I was emptying my real reserves. The accounts you found were meant to be discovered. Breadcrumbs to keep investigators busy while the real money disappeared. That's impossible, I said, but doubt was creeping in. Is it? Think about it, Avery. Would someone planning crimes as elaborate as mine really keep all his documentation in a safe with such an obvious combination? Would I really leave my laptop unprotected if it contained genuinely incriminating evidence? The horrible possibility that we'd been manipulated even in our discovery sent ice through my veins. You wanted us to find that evidence, Jasmine said, slowly. I needed you to find it. Two women working together to expose their victimizer. Very sympathetic story. Perfect distraction while I finalized the real transfers. Eric's expression turned cold. The beautiful irony is that your cooperation only made my job easier. The other women, Megan and Vanessa, also part of the plan. Amazing how people will agree to say anything when you offer them enough money to disappear permanently. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Patricia. Eric noticed immediately. Don't answer that, he said sharply. Why not? Because, Patricia, Morrison doesn't exist. The law firm you've been working with is a creation of my business partner. Every strategy session, every piece of legal advice, every security measure, all designed to keep you predictable and contained. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's impossible. Is it? You called an emergency number at midnight and immediately got connected to a senior partner? You never found that suspicious? Jasmine grabbed my arm. Avery, the panic buttons. Transmit directly to my security team, yes. Eric's smile was triumphant. I've been monitoring every conversation, every plan, every moment of your supposed rebellion. The criminal charges. were never filed. The arrest warrant doesn't exist. Even your precious evidence has been safely transferred to people who will ensure it never sees the inside of a courtroom. Eric stepped closer, and for the first time, I truly understood how much danger we were in. Now, he said quietly, let's discuss your real options. Our real options? I said, my mind racing despite the shock. Eric, you've made one crucial mistake in all your planning. Have I? You assumed we'd be stupid enough to trust only one lawyer. Eric's confident expression faltered slightly. What do you mean? Patricia Morrison was our second consultation. Our first was with my company's legal department yesterday morning. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. They've been monitoring this situation since Thursday. You're lying. Am I? Check your real bank accounts, Eric, the ones you just showed us. Eric glanced at his phone, and I watched his face change as he refreshed the banking app. The balance now showed 0. That's impossible. Those accounts are frozen by actual court order as of 6 p.m. tonight. My company's legal team filed emergency injunctions based on evidence we provided. I pulled out my real phone, not the one Eric's fake security team had been monitoring. They've been tracking your movements since you landed. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Eric spin around. 6 police officers in tactical gear entered our flat, led by Detective Inspector Sarah Reynolds. Eric Blackwood, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. As the officers moved to restrain him, Eric's mask finally shattered completely. This isn't over. You have no idea what you've unleashed. Actually, we do, Detective Reynolds said calmly. Your partner Sebastian Hayes was arrested in Zurich 3 hours ago. He's been very cooperative about the extent of your operation. I watched Eric's face as he realized his business partner had been the first to flip when faced with international financial crime charges. The cryptocurrency transfers? Jasmine asked. Intercepted, Detective Reynolds confirmed. Mr. Blackwood's accounts were under surveillance before he landed. Every transaction was traced and frozen. As Eric was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence, Detective Reynolds turned to us. Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Blackwood, you'll need to give formal statements, but you're both safe now. 3 months later, I stood in the same kitchen where this nightmare had begun, but everything had changed. Eric was serving a 12-year sentence for financial crimes. The flat was mine, along with the recovered assets from his accounts. Jasmine had given birth to a healthy boy and reconnected with River, who was overjoyed to learn about his son. They were taking things slowly, but I could see the genuine care between them, so different from Eric's calculated manipulation. Thank you, Jasmine said, holding her baby as we shared afternoon tea. For everything. Thank you, I replied, for showing me what real partnership looks like. Eric had tried to use our bond against us, but in the end, it had been our salvation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.